Hello everyone and welcome back to SteemTrail Gaming News. Today is the 28th of February 2018. My name is Kralizec and I will be your host for this evening. Today we got three interesting stories for you guys. We're first going to take a look at the fact that the International Game Developers Association is calling the loot box regulation censorship. Secondly, we're going to take a look at the fact that the Crytek CEO has stepped down. And last of all, we're going to take a look at a free game called David Lynch Teaches Typing. But let's begin with the big story of today. And that is the International Game Developers Association calling loot box regulation a form of censorship. So there's going to be a video game conference, a very well-known one called GDC, or Games Developers Conference, and is going to be taking place from March 19th to 23rd. And one of its planned events is a roundtable called Censorship Strike Backs, and within this panel there is a part of it that describes loot box regulation as a form of censorship. So let's first take a look at what exactly they are saying. Let me read that to you guys. Global gains against game censorship are sudden at a risk from combination of actions against our industry, with the World Health Organization classifying gaming disorder as a mental health condition and burgeoning legislation around the world against loot boxes. A handful of government officials again wield outsized power over our creative and business decisions. Additionally, augmented reality faces bans in parks, military bases, churches around the world, and a total ban in China. What are developers to do? Join us for a discussion on how we can protect our rights. So that is the description of the panel, and let's take it apart bit by bit. So first, there's the part about the World Health Organization classifying gaming disorder as a mental health condition. And I personally view that as somewhat of a neutral thing, because it is really hard to argue that some gamers take their gaming habits a bit too far. I'm unsure whether it is its own mental problem, whether it is specifically linked to gaming, or whether it is just another form of addiction, the same way as you can be addicted to pretty much anything. You can be addicted to watching paint dry. If maybe, I don't know, maybe some person in the world is. That's not a real point. The point is that you can get psychologically addicted to pretty much anything in the world. Obviously, you cannot get physically addicted to many substances, but that physical addiction gets built by your brain itself. And I think it would be very hard to argue that this isn't the case for gaming as well. There is healthy gaming and then there is unhealthy gaming. And unhealthy gaming is certainly a form of addiction. I do understand their point of arguing that maybe it isn't a mental disorder on its own. Let's skip the loot boxes for now. Let's take a look at them last. And there's the claim that augmented reality is facing bans in places like parks, military bases, churches, and a total ban in China. So I understand their concerns with China because, well, China is, they like censoring things. There's no doubt about that. But taking that as something that's happening all around the world is also a very hard thing to do because, well, China is its own place and they do things their own way. And saying that video games face worldwide censorship because China is doing its own thing, that's just ridiculous. That's just not the case, and I don't think it could be very well argued against it. Then there's the fact that some parks, some military bases, and churches are also banning the use of AR, or some events taking place in AR games within them. So I can very easily understand it for military bases and for churches. Because, well, military bases, there's some military installations, they're completely owned by the army or the armies, and I think, again, it would be very hard to argue why they should be allowing video game developers to use their bases as a means to set some events in there. The same goes for churches. They're, again, privately owned. It may not sound like it, but they are still privately owned by the church, you know? And because it's a private property, they do have the right to say, we do not want your AR games here. When it comes to parks, I think parks are a much harder decision. But on one hand, I sort of understand why they are doing it, is because there was a few cities who did this, that they banned, I think it was Pokemon Go events in some of their parks. But the thing is, they are still, they're not private property in the sense that they are owned by a private individual or a private company, but they are still owned by a specific town. And I do believe the town does have the right to decide whether they want some public, completely public AR games to take place there. And now to the last point, the one that I think is most controversial, at least at this moment, with the whole loot box thing still taking place. And I think I've made my position on loot boxes clear many times over, but just to quickly reiterate, loot boxes are fucking shit. And nobody should ever have them in their games because they're essentially addicting little things that make you addicted to gambling. That's what they are, psychologically. And claiming that their regulation is a form of censorship seems ridiculous. Just completely out of way and doesn't fit with censorship in any sense of the word. I'm obviously not saying that companies shouldn't be able to use loot boxes in their games. Though in my ideal world they would not be using them, but of their own personal ideology, because that is what they want to do, not because they are being coerced into doing it. But saying that regulating them so games with loot boxes cannot be sold to minors is censorship. It would be like arguing that the fact that minors cannot go into a casino is censorship. And I don't think this industry body would argue that. They would probably be, yeah, little kids should probably not go into a casino. They're just not mentally ready to handle that sort of environment. They would probably even lose their pants, even though some adults do. But you cannot protect adults, but you can protect minors. You should protect minors because, well, they aren't adults. Their psychological development is not finished yet. And that should be always taken into consideration. And I don't think there is a single government body that is right now arguing for a total ban on loot boxes. As far as I understand it, most of them just want to regulate to whom they can be sold and whether there should be some sort of a label attached to games that include loot boxes in their monetization model. And I view that as a rather important thing to come into the future. Because games that are meant for little children, especially those, should probably not have loot boxes in them. And when it comes to actually games for really small children, I do not think they should have even microtransactions in them, because the children just do not have the mental capacity to understand how much money they will be spending in total. They see like, yeah, I spend $1, and then I spend another one, and another one, and another one. They really don't have the mental capacity to understand that if they do that every single day, like 3-4 times, they will be spending pretty serious sums of money. And maybe you don't see it, but like spending $100 per week is a big deal for many families. And minors should not be able to spend that much money, even in rich families. And just arguing that, it's their own free will and free decision is not good. And I just don't view this as censorship in any sort of way. It just seems ridiculous. You're not being censored from portraying anything in your games. You're just being told, if you make a game with loot boxes, you cannot sell it to little children. The same way you cannot sell games that include nudity to little children. The same way you are prohibited from selling games with extreme gore to little children. That just makes fucking sense. And if you don't view it that way, then I will just assume you're not in the industry to make good creative games for your target demographic. You're in there to make purely money. And why I understand that you probably do want to make money, that's not a good viewpoint if you're an industry body whose goal is to promote the gaming industry. And that is what IGDAE should be. From my short, yeah, I will admit, short look into what they actually are, they are advocating for a few things. Let me quickly cite this from their Wikipedia page. So first off, they're arguing for quality of life for video game developers to make the process of video game developing easier and more pleasant. They're arguing for diversity to encourage people from a wide range of backgrounds to make games and be represented by games. And yes, that is still okay. Then they are claiming that they're anti-censorship. Let me touch on that a little bit later. Then they're arguing for business and legal issues, empowering the development community with business knowledge and advocating for developers. Yes, that is still a good thing, but there comes a point where you need to think whether what you're advocating for is actually good for the gaming industry in the long run. And having people who are addicted to loot boxes, because that is the psychological effect loot boxes have, is not a good thing in the end. And let me quickly touch back on being anti-censorship, which says recognizing games as an art form, as a medium of expression. Yes, there are many games that fit that bill. But on the other hand, there are many games that don't fit that bill at all. Not every single game is a piece of art. We need to realize that the same way that not every single painting is a piece of art. First of all, they can be just a consumer product made to sell. And let's say if I decide to make a, what could I make? Like I would make a really silly painting that would just be awful in its artistic quality, but I would design it so it would be easily manufactured. I do not believe that then it is an art form. It is just a consumer product as anything else. And those things I do not think fit into the bill of censorship. And loot boxes are not a form of art. They're a deliberate business decision to make more money through randomness, to encouraging people spending more money, because that psychological effect that is very similar to slot machines, that maybe next time I will win the thing I want in loot boxes. That's just not something to censorship applies. That is not art. That is nothing to do with freedom of expression. That all of these things are just purely business decisions, and they need to be taken in that way. Okay, that's enough for this. I rambled a lot. Let's take a look at the next piece of news. Let's take a look at the CEO of Crytek stepping down. So, Crytek, most of you will probably know this company, which is most famous for its development of the Cry engine, which is used in many, many gorgeous looking games. And their former CEO and the founder of Crytek, Sebastien, has decided to step down from the position of CEO. Right now, I didn't really find what his reasons for stepping down were. He gave the position, or no, not gave the position, his family, the brothers Envy and Farouk will now continue on with his job, and they will work as joint CEOs. Sevat came out and said, with the company in a strong position, now is the ideal time to recognize the existing leadership's excellent achievements over the past 2 years and formally transition executive leadership to Avni and Farouk. And I gotta say, this seems pretty okay. I think he's just tired and he wants to enjoy life, maybe spend some time with his family. he will still have a position in the company. He will work as an advisor and a strategic shareholder, which I love the name for that. That's just hilarious. But yeah, I just think he's really glad that he can step down, maybe spend some time with his family, do some of his hobbies, or maybe pursue some project he's been off-putting because he was working as a CEO of a company that is fairly large and did face quite a lot of problems in the past years. And now let's take a look at our last piece of news for today. Let's take a look at a free game that has just came out, and it's called David Lynch Teaches Typing. So, if you're retarded and you don't know who David Lynch is, he's a director famous for some shows like Twin Peaks or Eraserhead. Not to say that he's very fabulous hair. His hair is just awesome. And he has somewhat of a, let's call it, imposing voice. And that is the reason why you guys should try this game out. Even if you actually know how to type with all your fingers blindly, it's still an amazing experience to try this game out. I highly recommend it. It's just freaking awesome and somewhat hilarious at the same time. There's a link in the description of the video to the download of the game. There's also a link in the Steam article. So if you do want to try it out, be sure to do it. It's fun, hilarious, and you certainly should try it out. And with that being said, that's going to be it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video. If you did, please consider giving us a thumbs up here on YouTube and subscribing to this channel. If you are watching this on Steam, it may be you want to give an upvote to the post and follow our blog. Either way, leave a comment. If you played the David Lynch Teaches Typing, tell me, what do you think? Do you think it's awesome as I do? I hope you do. Also, be sure to tune in tomorrow for more gaming news, as we are a daily source of daily gaming news every single day. See you guys later with more gaming content.